Hello and welcome to Chapter 4, Job Analysis and Job Design. This is actually the final chapter in Module 1, so you'll be tested on 1, 2, 3, and 4. We are going to talk about job analysis, why really it's called the cornerstone or the foundation of HR, so it's something that's pretty fundamentally important, and then we're going to talk about how that is the building block of everything else, including job design. So a job analysis is the systematic process of collecting information about all the parameters of a job, its basic responsibilities, the behavior, skills, and the physical and mental requirements of the people who do it. Generally, I start off and I ask people, how do you know what your job is? And some people say, well, I have a job description. Some people say, well, I just kind of figured out as I went. The problem with not having a job analysis is that you don't know what the core fundamental responsibilities are of a job unless you actually sit down and you study it. So job analysis really looks at what you're supposed to do, what kind of abilities you're supposed to have, what kind of environment you're working in, what kind of responsibilities you have. It really sets the stage for knowing what you're responsible for and how to be a good performer of your job. So there are two parts that stem from a job analysis. So you should have a job description, which is a statement of the tasks, duties, and responsibilities, or TDRs, of a job to be performed. So what do you have to do the job well? Job specification is related, but it's slightly different. It's what you bring to the table. So it's the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs. Sometimes you'll hear it as KSAOs, O standing for other, of the person who is to perform the job. There is a pretty fundamental court case called Griggs versus Duke Power. So this actually says that any job specification you use in selection must relate specifically to the duties of the job. So what happened here is that this was in the sort of the 1950s, and they decided that they were going to they being the Duke Power Company, were going to put a reading test in order to be promoted to higher levels in the job. So they did hire people who are black, but the people who are black did sort of lower level duties. It didn't pay very well. And so to sort of be promoted into sort of more high paying jobs, being linemen and such, you had to sort of pass this reading test. So it actually went to court, and they found that not only did reading not predict being a good lineman or these other higher paying positions, they actually found that a lot of the white people who had the job couldn't read either. So it was sort of a case where this doesn't make any sense. It's not related to the job, this requirement that you have to have, and also the people that you have doing it can't even pass that requirement. So it's a pretty fundamental, important case as far as determining what anything that I say you have to do in a job has to actually be required to do the job. I can't pick things that have no relation whatsoever. So job analysis, we do call it the cornerstone or the foundation of everything else, because without a good job analysis, you can't form a job description or a job specification, and that hinders basically every other kind of HR function. How can you do strategic planning if I don't know what people are responsible for? I don't know what's entailed in their job. I don't know what kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities they have. How am I able to serve the strategic planning of the organization if I don't have that information? It's very hard to do any sort of workflow analysis or job design. How can I craft together jobs if I don't know what people are doing in the jobs they have currently? It's very hard for recruitment and selection if I don't have a good job analysis, because I'm not hiring in people to do the things that need to be done, right? If you've ever seen job descriptions that are like, want to work for a fast-paced organization, want to do exciting things, then call us. Well, that's not specific at all. I don't know exactly what the job is or what kind of things I need to bring to the table, and that can cause some inefficiencies. It can cause some problems. So it's better to know what the job is, and you actually have to go through a process to do that. It's hard to do performance appraisals if I don't know what you were actually supposed to do in your job. So if you've ever had a job where you worked hard at it and you thought you did a good job and you got to your performance appraisal and they were like, oh yeah, you really should have spend your time doing X, Y, and Z and not ABC, and your reaction probably should have been like, well, why wasn't I told, right? Why wasn't this in a job description? Compensation management, it's hard to compensate people appropriately if I don't know what their tasks and their duties and responsibilities are, and I don't know what kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities they're bringing to the table. And you have to have it for legal compliance too, as far as I can't call for a person to have a knowledge, skills, and ability if it's not related to the work that they are doing. You can get into some legal trouble if you don't make sure that there's consistency there. So how do we do a job analysis? So this will be a good way to study this, and it does outlay it pretty well. So first of all, there's different ways that you can get sources of data. They can come from job analysts, they can come from employees, they can come from supervisors, and every one of these things are tools in your toolbox. One is not necessarily better than the other, and they all come with pros and cons. So if you have a job analyst and they're not necessarily doing the job themselves, they might not necessarily have the best grasp of what the job entails. If you have an employee, well, if somebody asks me as an employee what I do, what are the problems there? I could over-exaggerate the importance of what I'm doing. I could, say I'm doing more than I actually am. We're all sort of predisposed to make our job seem important because if it doesn't seem important, we might be worried about the consequences, right? That'll get cut or there'll be pay decreases. I won't have opportunities for promotion. Also, there are several different ways to do a job well, right? So if I ask one employee, I might get a very different answer about how the job should be done. So if I want employee data, I'm probably going to have to sample a representative number of people to get a full idea of what that job is. Supervisor is also a good source, but the problem with supervisors is that they might not actually see the day-to-day, ins and outs, nitty-gritty of the job. Also, supervisors might think one thing is important, and when actually a lot of these other tasks are being done more frequently. So all of these are good sources of data. They all come with pros and cons. We have different methods of collecting data, so we can do interviews. I can sit down with you and say, hey, run me through a typical day. 8 to 5, what do you do? What's the first thing you do? Okay, what do you do next? How often do you do this? How important are these tasks? This is a good method because I can ask follow-up questions. If I don't understand something, I can sort of dig deeper. The quality of data that I get is a little bit richer. But if we look at the cons to this is pretty time consuming. So if I come in as a consultant and I have to sit down and everybody's interview is an hour and I'm interviewing 200 people, that's a lot of time and a lot of money, right? And I'm pulling people off of maybe their jobs that they're supposed to be doing. So, if I'm pulling somebody off the line, maybe that has to get shut down or it gets slowed down or somebody has to come in and take over for that time. So logistically, it can be a little bit problematic. I can do questionnaires, which are cheaper and easier. So I just, a list of questions, maybe even the same questions I would ask in interviews. But the problem is that I can't ask follow-ups, right? So if I sit down and I'm looking through people's questionnaires and they put something down that I don't understand, that's lost data. I can't, unless I call and follow up on it, I can't decipher that sometimes. Also, questionnaires might just be simple like checklist, right? Check all the things that you do. Put down a percentage of how much time you spend doing this. Anytime I do a questionnaire, there's problems. People could be looking to pencil whip it so they don't put too much time into it. Also, if it's too long, I could get fatigue effects where people answer the first couple of questions and then just sort of taper off. There's also some social desirability. There might be some pressure to answer it a certain way, which you get in interviews as well. Observations is another way you can do this. So you could actually just watch people do their job. And I know a guy he went to my PhD program, and that was part of his consulting gig. He watched an overnight crew and watched what they did and made tallies about how often they did it, how important it was to get the job done in total. Again, very time consuming. And also, what do you do if somebody's watching you do your work? well, I'd probably work harder, right? If somebody's standing over me, I probably will do different things and work at a higher percentage than I might do if nobody was watching me. So we have to be sort of aware of that. The final thing is diaries, and I don't want you to think like, dear diary, I hate my job so much. It's not that type of diary. What it is a lot of times they're used with like electronic equipment, and it'll prompt you, say like every 2 hours, it'll ask a question and then you answer it right then and there. The nice thing about this is that I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So if you're like, oh, in the last 6 months, what have you done here at your job? I might forget all sorts of things. But if I have a diary that's prompting me like, hey, what did you do in the last 2 hours? The data is probably going to be more accurate, right? You're going to have a more accurate recollection of what you just did. The problem is a lot of times this requires electronic equipment, which can be expensive. Also, somebody might be okay with it the first time, a couple times it beeps at you, but after that, they might be like, I did stuff, enter. So we have to be careful about the degradation of the quality of data that we get out of this. You can use all three sources of data. You could use all methods of collecting data. You could do some sort of combination. It's really up to you. It's really up to you about what kind of resources you have, and I'm talking money and time and people. Do you have to get an outside consultant to do this? Do you have in-house resources that are capable of getting this process done? Or do you need to get it done on the quick, cheap, and dirty? That all depends on the strategic focus of the organization and the resources that you have in hand. The kind of data that you should get out of this, though, are the tasks that people do, performance standards, what differentiates high performers from low performers, the kind of responsibilities you would have for a job, the knowledge required, the skills required, the experience that you need, the job context. Is this going to be something where it's nights and weekends? That's something that's good to know. Is it going to be outside in sub-0 degree temperatures? That's good to know. The kind of duties that you will be responsible for and the equipment that will be used. Once you get all that data, then you can do your job description, which remember are tasks, duties, and responsibilities. You can do your job specifications, which is what you bring to the table, so skills, physical demands, knowledge requirements, abilities, and then that will help you know what's important in that job, what that job really encompasses, so that you can do appropriate recruitment. You can do appropriate selection. You can do training and development if people don't have these kinds of knowledge, skills, and abilities they're supposed to. I can actually sit down and say, okay, here's the job that I hired you for, and here's your performance. How closely does this match? That's what a good performance appraisal system should do. And also, it should allow me to compensate you. The more knowledge, skills, and abilities, or the more important the tasks, duties, and responsibilities that you have on your plate, the more you should get paid for. So from an individual perspective, that allows me to negotiate for my salary and for raises more effectively and more objectively. And from an employer perspective, that allows me to determine what jobs are most important so that I can pay people what differentiates top talent from not so top talent, so I can pay the people that are good performers. And that allows me to have better retention, less turnover, higher performance, all the things that we really care about. So there are several methods that we use to collect job analysis sort of data. I won't cover all of them. The functional job analysis is where we started. That's kind of what we had to start with. Most companies don't use it anymore. ONET is a cool place to explore, and we're going to come back and look at that here in a second when we look at the activity. The position analysis questionnaire, or PAC as usually it's called, is a off-the-shelf kind of questionnaire that allows you to look at different parts of a job and really kind of look at what is most important and what is most critical and the frequency. Critical incident method is where you're looking for the differentiation between high performers and low performers. So, part of your job is to make sure that if the core, engine overheats, you're able to shut it down. Well, tell me about a time that somebody did that task appropriately. Like, when did they start? How are they able to diagnose it? What was the outcome? Well, tell me about somebody who didn't handle that situation very well. This will help me be able to differentiate high performers versus low performers. So I'm really looking for the top and the bottom. A task inventory analysis is oftentimes just a checklist. So here are a list of things that you should be doing in your job or could be doing in your job. Tell me how often you do it and how critical it is. So there's an important difference between those two things. You could do something very frequently, and that makes it something that I want to make sure I hire people in that can do that. But again, let's say that you are in charge of the button that keeps the factory from exploding. I'm going to hope that you don't do that task every single day. If you do, there's something wrong. But I certainly want somebody who's capable of performing that task when the time comes, even if it only happens once in a blue moon. And then last is a competency-based job analysis. And competency-based is a little bit different than job analysis. This is a newer approach. It's a little bit sexier. So large Fortune 500 companies are switching to this approach. I actually worked on Microsoft's competency-based analysis. And job analysis is a very bottom-up kind of process, right? You look at all the tasks, all the things that are wrapped up in a job, and then you collect all that data and you write up job descriptions and job specifications. It's a very bottom-up kind of thing. And it's very sort of in the moment, what's being done now. Competency-based modeling is really about what you want to be in the future. So it's forward thinking, and it's also top down. So it starts with the CEO and upper management deciding what kind of core competencies does everybody in the company need to have in order for this to be a successful organization. And then it sort of gets broken up. So everybody needs these 6 things. But then, if I'm an accountant, I probably need different things than if I'm working in legal. So they sort of break it up by department or by function. So it gets sort of broken down from there. But again, it's more sort of everybody has to have this. This will help us grow as a company. And task analysis is more, this is what the specific job needs, what you need to do to perform it right now. So for the activity, I want you to go to ONET online. And I want you to click on the I want to be box, which is the purple box on the left of the screen. And I'll kind of walk you through this here. And then in the first box, I want you to enter the title of your dream job. So it can either be your dream job or the job you want coming out with the degree that you're getting. There's some wiggle room there. I'm not particularly picky. And then I want you to look at the given information and answer the following questions. Does the information seem accurate? Does the information for the task, duties, and responsibilities, does it seem accurate for the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you would have to be successful at the job? Were you surprised by any of the information? Is there anything you can do to become better prepared for this sort of dream job or the job you want coming out of your program? Also, if you're curious, you can take the interest profiler, which is the I'm not really sure box, and it sort of indicates what sort of jobs may suit you. This is a case where, if you really want to be a pilot and pilot doesn't come on your list, it doesn't mean that you can't be an excellent pilot. It just means that you might have to work a little bit harder than people who are naturally predisposed to liking the kinds of tasks that would be part of being a pilot. So if you want to do that, I think it's a cool thing to do. Then you can kind of talk about your results, but that's not necessary. So let's sort of walk through this real quick. Well, it is not letting me do this. So what I'll have you guys do is sort of explore the site. It's pretty cool. If you have questions, you can certainly email me. I'll be happy to sort of walk you through it. But I think that this is a pretty good primer to let you know what you're sort of responsible for the activity. And again, just like any activity, write me up a page, 2 pages, double-spaced, and send it to me, and that will be your activity participation points for Chapter 4. So I like examples. I'm sort of a show me an example kind of learner, and also I like to, get my hands on it, do it kind of learner. So I just put this here so you can kind of see an example of how a job statement might look. So here again is sort of, the job, the essential functions that you would have to have. And then this is the job specification. So what kind of things do you need to bring to the table in order to do this job effectively? So there are certainly problems with job descriptions. I talked about like if they're weirdly written as far as being super general, like join our fast-paced, wonderful company. Well, okay, but what is it that you do? What is it that I'm supposed to do? And my problem with this is that I want a pretty specific sort of job description because I want people to read that and say, oh, I'm not qualified to do that. I want people to self-weed themselves out, right? So I don't have to bother interviewing them. They're not wasting their time. I'm not wasting my time. And you don't get that when these really sort of vaguely written, job ads kind of come up. A lot of times they're not updated as job duties or specifications change. There's no magic number, but the rule of thumb is like every 5 years, you should sort of look at your job descriptions, your job analysis. If you are doing something that has not changed since the dawn of time, then you could probably go a little bit longer. But if you work in a company where things are changing, you're on the cutting edge, people's responsibilities, what kind of KSA, knowledge, skills, and abilities they have to be successful are changing, then you might have to do it more often than every 5 years. We don't want them to violate the law by containing specifications not related to job success. So let's say I have something in there like you have to lift over 50 pounds in order to have this job. Well, if I'm not lifting any equipment at all, and that's not really part of my job, and that's keeping people who have a disability out of this job because you say that they have to have this, that's a legal issue, right? So we want to make sure that especially for protected classes, I'm not putting something in the job description that really shouldn't be there. The last thing is that if it's too specific, a lot of times you'll have people say, well, that's not in my job description, right? Yeah. You asked me to do this. No. That's clearly not something that I'm being paid for. So you can put in like sort of other jobs and tasks and duties as assigned, put in kind of a catch-all there, just to make sure that you're not dealing with people who are like, no, this is not in one of the 5 things that are written down of what I need to do for this job. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about job design. So job design flows out of job analysis, and this is where we consider on how we actually set up jobs so that people are not only productive, but satisfied and get something out of their job. So the Hackman and Oldman model is pretty famous. And what they say is that you have to have these 5 job characteristics, which are skill variety, so doing more than one thing, task identity, seeing something from beginning to end, task significance, which is feeling like your job has some meaning, autonomy, which is being given enough leeway to do your job as you see fit, and feedback, which is how you're doing your job. Are you doing it right or not? They say if you have these 5 things, this leads to more meaningfulness of the work performed, responsibility for work outcomes, and knowledge of the results of the work performed. And why do we care about these psychological states? Well, Hackman and Oldman, and research supports this. They say if you have these psychological states, it leads to higher work performance, which we care about a lot, an increased internal motivation, which I'll talk about here in a second, and lower absenteeism and turnover. So less people calling in sick for work, less people leaving the job. You've had OB, so you should understand motivation, but internal motivation is different from external motivation. External motivation, I always ask people, why do you have a job? And a lot of times people say, well, because I get paid for doing the job. That's external motivation. I am giving you something that you value so you can purchase other things that you value, whether that's your rent or your mortgage or food or pay your bills. Internal motivation is not something that I give you. It's something that you find that you like about your job that makes your job more meaningful. So let's say, and you can have both, right? Let's say that you decide to become a doctor, and doctors, get paid a lot of money, right? And you like that. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's external motivation. It's also something that dries up. The moment I stop giving you money, or I stop giving you benefits, or I stop giving you these things, you're probably not going to want to do your job anymore. Going back to the doctor example, maybe you also really like your job though because you save people's lives. And at the end of the day, that makes you feel good about what you do. That's internal motivation. It's something about the job that makes you like doing the job itself. That's powerful. It's more powerful than external motivation, but it's harder to make it a part of the job. So if you're one of those people that actually just really likes your job because you make a product or you have a service that you really believe in, or you help people out, or, there's a high, level of craftsmanship that comes with what you do, that really is powerful. And you're lucky to have a job where you have that sort of internal motivation. Other things we can do to make a job better is job enlargement. So this is where you're adding greater amounts of tasks. You have to be careful with this though, right? Because just giving people more stuff to do isn't necessarily going to make them like their job or find value in their job anymore. However, if you're only doing one thing over and over and over again, getting to do other things actually might be quite enjoyable. But we want to be careful with just throwing more stuff at people. Job rotation is where you actually go into different jobs or even different departments and try that out. I really like job rotation. I think it gives people a better strategic view of the organization. It allows people to see where puzzle pieces fit together, right? It allows people to develop networks so that they're able to play nice with other departments or other people doing different jobs. But just like anything, if it's set up poorly, you're just put into a place for a week and, you don't really have anything to do and you don't get a good idea of what that job's about or what that department is about, then it can just be a terrible system. So if it's set up well, I think there's a lot of value there. Job enrichment, I like a little bit better than job enlargement because this means that I'm not just giving you more tasks, but I'm giving you tasks that add more meaning to your job, right? And it's either things that you get some sort of internal motivation from, or it just could be things like, hey, I'm giving you these additional tasks. This will prepare you for, your next step. This will prepare you for a management position, or this will prepare you for, a bump up in what you're doing now. People can get a lot out of that as well. Employee empowerment is allowing people to make changes in their job. If you work somewhere where you've seen things not work so well and you said, hey, I have a really great idea on how to fix this system, make it more efficient and more effective. And they said, oh, that's a great idea. Let's form a committee. Let's work on this. Let's implement this. Then you might feel empowered. Like, hey, when I see things not going right in my organization, I can say something. That's a good feeling psychologically. If you are told, sit down, shut up, we don't care, go do your job as we've told you to do it, that's likely to not make you like your job as much, right? It's likely to psychologically put you in a place where you don't feel valued. Job crafting is a really interesting idea. It's the idea where in any job, there are probably parts of it that you like and parts of it that you don't like. So think about your current job and think of if there was a way that you could take, a knife and cut out the pieces of it that you don't like and give it to somebody else and just focus on the parts that you do like, would that make you happier in your job? Would that make you more productive in your job? That's the idea of job crafting, is that we all like different parts of our job, and if we could just give the parts we don't like to somebody who does like those parts, then that would be pretty synergistic, right? That would work out pretty well. The only problem with that, though, is I always question, aren't there just parts of jobs that nobody likes? Does anybody like cleaning toilets? Is anybody like, I will take on everybody's toilet cleaning jobs, give those to me, that's what I like, and you can have the rest of the stuff. So we have to be careful at looking at this as like a cure-all. I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's something worth exploring. I don't know that it works for all jobs, for all peoples. Employee engagement is a really hot topic, especially in Europe right now. It's the idea that there's a difference between workers who just come in and punch their clock from 9 to 5 and then leave and just basically do enough so that they don't get in trouble. And the people that show up and get lost in their work, want to solve, hard, difficult problems, complex problems, lose themselves in what they're doing because they're so engrossed or caught up with their work. We call those people high engagement, and that's a very different employee than somebody who's just sort of a butt in a seat. So we've actually kind of moved away from looking at job satisfaction, and instead a lot of companies are now doing employee engagement surveys instead of, job satisfaction surveys. So we care more about, are you wrapped up in your job, and why is that, and how can we promote that? So we're going to talk pretty quickly about teams, and that'll sort of wrap up this lecture. So there's different sorts of teams. There's cross-functional teams. So that's when it's staffed with a mix of employees from different backgrounds, different departments, so that you're able to sort of accomplish a very specific objective. I might have somebody from marketing. I might have a person from legal. I might have a person from my tech department. I might have a person from operations, all come together so that we're able to solve a usually pretty complex, but pretty specific problem. Project teams are specifically put together to design a new product or service. I am a video game junkie, so, if they're going to put together Halo 16, they're going to put together a bunch of people, and that's all they do, right? That's their baby, that's their project, that's all they're focused on. So it's based around some sort of new product or service. Self-directed teams are getting more popular, so this is the idea that a team can function better if they don't have to go through several layers of red tape to get approval for things. So this sort of takes out having to go to the boss, right? A self-directed team is able to make decisions about their budget, about staffing, about priorities without having to go to their boss and say, hey, we discussed this is what we think, is this okay? So it's pushing down responsibility to the people who are actually doing the job. Task force teams are put together when there's some sort of major problem. If we had, knock on wood, I don't want this to happen, but let's say we had some sort of major earthquake. I might put together a task force team at my organization and say, okay, do we have heavy equipment? Can we work with the local emergency services to help, dig people out, make sure people are safe? Can we contact all our employees? Can we make sure that they're safe, they have clean water, they have food supplies? I would put together this task force team to identify and help manage this crisis. And it doesn't have to be an external crisis. It could be, hey, we have a batch of food that's gone bad. How do we solve this? But it's clearly something that is a major problem that has to be addressed. And the last is process improvement teams. So this is where we put together people to talk about decreasing waste, enhancing productivity. Basically, you're just looking to enhance efficiency and effectiveness in any part of your organization. It's part of sort of a total quality management approach. Just like, let's not rest on our laurels. Let's look for issues. Let's look for things that we can improve on. Let's just make sure that we are continually trying to progress as an organization. So characteristics of successful teams: they should be committed to shared goals and objectives. They should be motivated and energetic. They should have an open and an honest communication. There should be some sort of shared leadership. You should have clear role assignments. You want a climate of cooperation, collaboration, trust, and accountability. And you want to have a recognition of conflict and its positive resolution. So it's not about not having conflict. It's all about managing conflict appropriately and successfully. Benefits of employee teams: so you have an increased integration of individual skills. As awesome as you are, you probably have some weak sides, right? Or you just don't have a background in some areas. Bring somebody on who does, so they're complementary to what you bring to the table. Better performance in both quality and quantity. Often solutions to unique and complex problems. We have a reduced delivery time, reduced turnover and absenteeism, and more accomplishment among team members. And again, the caveat to this is if the team is functioning well and appropriately. If you have teams that are dysfunctional, you're not necessarily going to see these kind of outcomes. Last thing we're going to talk about is flexible work schedules. This idea of work family or work-life balance is really important to a lot of people, especially among millennials. So the idea is, how do I structure work so that I can also have time to be with my family or enjoy my hobbies, so that I'm not just my work? So we can help people accomplish that in a couple of different ways. So we could have flex time. So this could be like, oh yeah, you want to go see your son's soccer game and it's at 2 o'clock. Well, on a Wednesday. Well, just leave a little bit early and you can make up the time. You can stay later on Thursday and Friday to make up the time, right? So you're generally still working 40 hours, but you're not necessarily just doing it in an 8-hour block. And that's, again, allowing people a little bit more flexibility to do the things that they need to do. Sometimes you need to do things during an 8 to 5, Monday through Friday time frame that you just need your work to allow you to do. And again, this works at some organizations and some positions. It doesn't in other places. Compressed work week. So this is when you're shortening the number of the days in the work week by lengthening the number of hours that you work. So, a pretty common example might be working 4/10s. The other thing that's really popular is this idea of telecommuting. So this is where you're sort of working from home, right? Sometimes you can telecommute 1 day a week. Sometimes I've known people that just telecommute all the time and just come in for special meetings. I do want you to watch this clip on Yahoo and telecommuting. So Melissa Mayer took over Yahoo and then decided that there would be no telecommuting. And then they sort of discussed, was this a good business decision? Was this a bad business decision? I do think it's interesting that she was sort of called out for this decision, but actually 2 other companies, including Best Buy and Home Depot, actually had the same policy, but they were men CEOs who made it, who were new fathers. So is it different if we have a woman making this call versus men? Are there some gender issues here? But I just want you to take a second, watch the clip, and say, do you think this is a good call? Right? No right or wrong answer. Just put some thought into it.